The paper fluttered like a small white bird in the still air of New Dawn Chapel. It had slid from the wooden pulpit and landed at the feet of Malik Carter and his wife, Renee. They had come before sunrise to pray. 15 years of asking felt heavy on their tongues, but now they both stopped breathing. The paper moved again as if a wind had found its way into a closed church. Renee bent down and picked it up with both hands. There was only one sentence written in careful, shaky letters. "Dear God, please give me a mommy and a daddy who will love me and never leave." The words shook. Not the ink, the words themselves inside them. For a moment the old ceiling fan hummed, the wooden beams creaked, and everything else was quiet. Outside, the street of the Lagos neighborhood had not yet woken, but a rooster called somewhere far off, and the first Danfo buses coughed to life. Renee pressed the paper to her chest. "Malik," she whispered, not trusting her voice. "Somebody left this here right now?" The church was empty. No ushers, no choir robes whispering from the back room, no pastor with his gentle booming voice. No one, except a soft sound like a breath caught behind a pew. Malik turned toward the sound. He was tall, with a calm face that people trusted. He spoke softly, as he always did when he didn't want to scare anyone. "Hello? Is someone here?" Silence. Then they saw her. She was kneeling at the far side of the front pew, small as a shadow, with big brown eyes and a pink ribbon in her hair that had been tied and retied too many times. Her dress was clean but old, a faded yellow cotton with a mended hem. She hugged herself and did not move. Renee's hand found Malik's. Her eyes filled. The letter trembled in her other hand. "Did you, sweetheart, did you write this?" she asked. Her voice was as gentle as a song hummed under one's breath. The girl nodded once. She stood slowly, careful not to make the bench creak, and walked to them in quiet steps, barefoot on the cool tiles. At the altar rail she stopped. She looked like she might run or fly or disappear. "What's your name?" Malik asked. "Amara," she said. Her voice was small but clear. "Amara Johnson." "Amara," Renee said, tasting the name like a prayer. "How old are you?" "I turned 8 last Saturday." She almost smiled, as if trying to remember what a birthday is supposed to feel like. "I didn't have cake, but Mama Joy at the corner shop gave me a mango. She said God sees me." Renee knelt so her eyes were level with Amara's. She held the letter carefully, as if it might tear if she breathed too hard. "Amara, why did you come so early? Church hasn't started." Amara glanced toward the big wooden doors. "I only come when nobody is here. It's quieter. God listens better when I whisper." And I needed to whisper. A long moment spread itself across the tile floor between them. Malik heard the fan. He heard Renee's breath. He heard something else too, hope, thin and bright like a thread being pulled through fabric. He looked at the letter again. The handwriting was careful, the way children write when they want God to understand them. The ink had blotted in one place, a small dot where a tear had fallen and dried. "Amara," Malik said, "where are your parents?" She looked past them, up at the stained glass window where a burst of sunrise was just beginning to paint the glass with color, red, gold, and a blue that looked like the ocean on a good day. "My real mommy," she said slowly, "is in heaven. Mama Joy says heaven is the place where nobody forgets your name. I never met my daddy. Auntie Beezy says I asked too many questions about him." Renee swallowed. "Who do you live with now?" "My aunt. But she says times are hard." Amara's eyes flicked to the floor. "Sometimes I sleep on the mat near the kitchen because the bed is for her and Uncle Teo when he comes. Sometimes I'm good, but even when I am good they say I should not talk too much or eat too much or ask for things. So I came to God." She lifted her chin, brave in the way only children can be. "God is free to talk to, right?" "Yes," Renee said, voice breaking. "Yes, baby, he is." A breeze nobody felt moved the paper again. Renee looked at Malik. In his eyes there was a question, and the question was this: is this how an answer begins? They had spent 15 years in rooms that smelled like white paint and disinfectant. 15 years of hearing doctors speak in gentle words that still cut. 15 years of baby showers for others and empty guest rooms at home. They had begun to pray with fewer words and more silence, because silence hurts less when it breaks. And now a letter. "Did you write this here today?" Malik asked softly. Amara nodded. "I came when the sun was still hiding. I wrote it with the pen pastor keeps for the prayer book. I told God exactly what I need." She said the next part like a secret. "I told him I would be a good daughter and I would help sweep the yard and carry small things from the store and sing loudly in church." Renee smiled through her tears. "He heard you." The old clock in the back room clicked to a new minute. Outside the door, a motorbike rumbled past and faded away. The city yawned. The day was beginning to stretch its arms. Inside, there was a shared stillness that felt like standing on the edge of a story before it tips into motion. "Can we sit?" Renee asked, gesturing to the front pew. Amara perched on the edge of the bench, hands folded tight, as if she might be carried away by her own hopes. Malik and Renee sat a careful arm's length away, giving her space as if she were a small bird they didn't want to startle. "Amara," Malik said, "do you come here often?" She nodded. "I come on Saturdays when Andy goes to the market and Sundays when we all come. But I only write letters when the church is empty. I wrote one when I was 6, asking God for school sandals. They came from a charity box the next week. I wrote one when I was 7, asking God to make Auntie laugh again. She laughed at a TV show that Friday. So today I wrote this." She looked up. "Do you think God can do this big thing too?" Renee reached out and, after a gentle pause, let her hand rest on the bench between them. "Amara, I think God specializes in big things and quiet beginnings." They sat there, 3 hearts beating in a small triangle of hope. The sunlight crept across the floor, reaching toward their shoes. Dust danced in that warm beam, gold and light, like tiny prayers made visible. From the back room, a door clicked, a small sound like a throat clearing. All 3 turned. No one. Only the tidy room with stacks of hymnals, the iron for choir robes, the switch for the bell rope. Something else, though, a feeling that they were not alone. Suddenly Amara stood. "I have to go," she said, fear surfacing and then trying to hide. "If Auntie wakes and I'm not home, she will be angry." Renee stood too. The world seemed to tilt, the kind of tilt you feel just before something important is said. "Wait, Amara, her sentence was a handful of threads and she didn't know which one to pull. "We don't want you to be in trouble." "It's okay," Amara said, but she was already moving toward the aisle, bare feet silent. "I just needed to put the letter where God can see it." Malik rose. "He saw it," he said, holding up the page. "So did we." Amara gave a small nod. "Sometimes God sends people." She said it with a surprising certainty, like someone repeating a line taught early and remembered forever. The doors of the church shook. A fist, hard and impatient, pounded against the wood. The second blow rattled the iron bar across the handles. Malik stepped instinctively in front of the girl. Renee drew Amara gently behind her. "Open up!" a voice shouted from outside, thick with anger, thick with a night that had not yet ended for him. "Who is there this early?" "I see light inside." Amara's body went stiff. Her hand found Renee's and clung tight, small fingers pressing, the trust of a child thrown like a rope across a river. Renee bent and whispered, "Who is it?" Amara's answer was a breath more than a sound. "Uncle Teo." The fist slammed the door again. "Amara." The name rolled across the empty seats like thunder. "If you are in there, come out now. You think you can run to the church every time? Come out." Malik looked at Renee. Renee looked at Malik. The paper trembled in Malik's hand, the ink bright and wet in the morning light. And it was a prayer. In front of them was a child. At the door was a storm. The iron bar shuddered under another hit. Somewhere above, the bell rope swung slightly, and the bell gave a single high note, one clear sound that hung in the air like a line thrown from heaven. Malik lifted the letter, palm open, as if lifting it higher might lift them all. The door bolt scraped. "Stay behind me," he said to Renee and Amara, heart steady, voice even. Renee squeezed Amara's hand and whispered, "It's okay, baby. We're here." The handle turned. The wood quivered. The next sound would be the door bursting wide. And in that breathless space, Pastor Emmanuel's deep voice rose from the back of the church where no one had seen him, strong and calm as a river after rain. "Who comes to God's house with fists?" Pastor Emmanuel stepped into the aisle like a tall tree finding its place in the wind. His white clerical collar looked brighter in the early light. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He walked past Malik, past Renee and Amara, and stood facing the heavy wooden doors. "Who comes to God's house with fists?" he repeated, steady as a drumbeat. On the other side, the angry voice faltered. "Pastor? It's me, Teo. Open the door." Pastor slid the iron bar free and pulled the door inward. Teo stumbled into the entryway, eyes red, shirt half-buttoned, the smell of palm wine riding the air around him. He looked big in the doorway, like a storm cloud that hadn't decided whether to break. He saw Amara. "You," he said, pointing. His hand shook. "You disappear before dawn and run here? Your aunt woke and you are gone. You think this church will hide you?" Pastor stepped between them. "Teo," he said, voice even, "God's house hides no one. It protects the weak. Which one are you today?" Teo's mouth worked. His eyes flashed toward Malik and Renee, then back to Pastor. She lives in my sister's house. We feed her. She should not run out like a thief. Amara flinched at the word thief. Renee moved closer to the girl, one soft step as if approaching a skittish foal. She wasn't stealing, she said. She was praying. Praying? Teo barked a laugh that had no joy. Praying won't buy gari. Praying won't cook soup. She leaves work to who? To my sister? To me. Malik lifted his hands open. Brother, let's talk, he said calmly. No one wants trouble. We can sit. We can breathe. Teo's gaze took Malik's measure. Men like Malik were hard to be angry at. Everything about him said steady. Still, Teo's pride was louder than his good sense. Who are you to talk to me? He snapped. Pastor nodded toward the front pews. We are people who woke early to pray and found a child crying out to God. You are a man who woke to find her gone. Said all of you. We will use words instead of fists. Teo hesitated, then threw himself into the nearest pew as if to show the bench he was stronger than it. He scrubbed a hand over his face. His voice, when it came again, was smaller. We have no money, he muttered. My work dried up. The landlord is on our neck. This child eats and asks and asks. Amara stood very still, eyes on her feet. I don't ask for much, she said in a whisper. No one said you do, Pastor replied gently. But sometimes poverty shouts so loudly it drowns out truth. Renee crouched so she and Amara were eye to eye. Do you want to go home with your uncle now? She asked. Amara's eyes darted to Teo, then to the door, then back to the stained glass window where the burst of sunrise was growing. Her voice trembled. If I don't, Auntie will be angry. But if I do, will God still find my letter? Renee held up the page. He already did. Pastor turned to Teo. We can walk with you, he offered. Together. No one will shout. We will talk to your sister calmly. If there is a burden, the church will help carry it. But no child should be waking before dawn to hide her prayers. Teo looked uncertain, like a man with two roads under his feet. And if I say no? Pastor's eyes were kind and made of iron. Then I will call Sister Dorcas from the social desk and the child welfare line with her. And we will all meet at your house anyway, with more eyes watching than you will like. Choose the softer road, Teo. The fight drained out of Teo like water from a broken pot. He nodded once, gruff. We walk, he said. He made a motion with his chin toward Amara, something between apology and habit. Come. Amara did not move until Renee gave her hand a tiny squeeze. You won't be alone, she murmured. We'll go with you. They stepped out into the morning, the city awake now, bread sellers clapping dough, a hawker singing the price of oranges, a bus conductor hanging from the side of a danfo and calling for passengers. The heat was beginning to rise off the road, but the air was still soft. Pastor walked beside Teo, talking of work the church sometimes found for men with strong backs and clean hands. Teo grunted in replies that loosened as the steps added up. Malik walked on Amara's other side, keeping pace with her short legs. Renee stayed close, as if a thin thread attached at their wrists might snap if she drifted. What grade are you in? Malik asked Amara gently, trying to put her mind somewhere safe. Primary 3, she said. I like comprehension. I don't like long division. Malik smiled. Many people don't. Do you have children? She asked him, quick and shy. He glanced at Renee just a flicker, and then he answered truthfully. Not yet. Amara nodded like someone fitting a new fact into a puzzle she carried in her pocket. Maybe God is saving a special one, she said. Mama Joy says sometimes God is not late. He is just making the gift fit. Malik swallowed around the ache that rose in his throat. Mama Joy is wise. They turned into a narrow street where zinc roofs sloped toward each other and neighbors said good morning without stopping the hands that were already working. A woman in a wrapper swept her doorstep. A boy bounced a flat football until a goat decided it wanted the ball too. The houses were close and made of cement and tin and prayers. Beezy's door was a rectangle of brown wood with tired paint. Teo knocked, not with anger this time but with the hand of someone who wished the door would open into a different story. It opened to Beezy's face, sharp from too many worries, hair tied in a scarf, eyes already braced for a fight. When she saw the four of them with Pastor, her back went straight. Church people, she said, voice like a metal spoon on a metal pot. You brought her. Pastor gave a small bow. Good morning, Beezy. We came to talk. She huffed, half welcome, half resentment. Talk. Talking doesn't pay rent, Pastor. Sometimes it opens the door for help that does, he said kindly. They entered a room tidy in a way poverty demands. Everything folded, everything stacked, everything used. A small Frigidaire hummed louder than it needed to. A calendar from a paint company hung crooked on the wall, a picture of a family smiling at a house that looked like a promise. In a corner, a thin mat was rolled tight. B.Z. planted her fists on her hips. Amara, where did you go before dawn? You choose today to disgrace me? Amara bowed her head. I went to talk to God. To ask God for what? Money to drop from sky? Goat to lay egg. She laughed sharp. The laugh hit Amara like a slap she didn't deserve. Renee felt the girl inch closer to her side until their elbows touched. Pastor lifted a hand, quieting the edges in the room. We all know times are hard, he said. We came because the child is afraid. Fear is a poor teacher. If Amara is in your care, she must be safe. If care has become too heavy, we will help you carry it. The church has a pantry. Sister Dorcas can help with school fees. Brother Cunnell is hiring at the block shop 3 streets over. And we will not leave without making a plan. Beezy's eyes flicked, calculating pride against relief. Church will pay school? She asked, voice softer by a hair. Church will help, Pastor said. And we will check. No child is a broom to be used until it breaks. Teo's shoulders sagged. He sat on the edge of a chair that looked like it had one more sit left in it. I drink too much, he mumbled to no one and everyone. Work is scarce. I'm not a bad man, Pastor. But trouble came and sat on my roof. Then we will help you chase it off, Pastor replied. The room's air eased a little. Outside someone laughed. A radio played a gospel song thinly through a neighbor's wall. The world kept being the world. Renee glanced down at Amara. The girl clutched a small fabric pouch at her side, the kind sewn from old cloth and tied with a string. It looked like something precious lived in it. What do you have there? Renee asked gentle. Amara's fingers tightened. It's my treasure, she said shyly. I keep my notes to God. And a picture. May I see? Renee asked and waited. It took a moment, but Amara nodded. She loosened the string and poured the contents into her palm. A folded paper square, a bead bracelet of tiny blue and white beads, and a piece of cloth no bigger than a hand. The cloth was soft and worn where many small fingers had rubbed it for comfort. Along one edge, 4 tiny blue stitches made a small shape, like a star, and beside them, in careful thread, 2 embroidered letters. Renee reached without thinking and then stopped herself, asking with her eyes. Amara gave the cloth into her hand. The world narrowed. Renee knew this fabric. Not in the way a tailor knows cloth. In the way a heart knows a song it hasn't heard in years. 8 years unspooled all at once. A rainy Thursday at Grace Maternity, the outreach the church ran every month. Boxes of donated baby blankets in a back room that smelled of Dettol. Renee staying behind after others left, stitching tiny blue stars into the corner of each blanket so the mothers would know someone's hands had prayed over it. On one of those nights, a teenage mother with a soft, tired smile had come alone. Her name had been Nia. She had held Renee's hand and whispered a fear and a hope that kept Renee awake for weeks. Renee had stitched 2 initials into one blanket because the girl had refused to give a last name, only a first. Renee Carter. R.C. She had sent the blanket with a nurse and kept the girl's trembled prayer in her chest. Renee turned the cloth over. 2 letters looked back at her in the bright morning light. R.C. Her initials. Her stitches. Her star. Her knees went weak. Malik saw Renee's face go pale. What is it? He asked, reaching to steady her. Renee looked at Amara, then at the cloth, then back at Amara again, as if her eyes were trying to lift something heavy and holy. When she found her voice, it was thin and bright, like the first note of a song you've been waiting to hear. This, she whispered, holding up the cloth so the room could see, came from a blanket I made. Beezy's brows pinched. What are you saying? Renee swallowed, tears standing like clear beads she hadn't given permission to fall. 8 years ago at Grace Maternity, I stitched this blue star and my initials into a baby blanket. A young mother came in alone. She asked me to pray that her daughter would find a family who would love her. Amara's eyes widened. My mama left this with me, she breathed. She told Auntie that the woman who made the star told God my name would be known. Renee's hand shook around the cloth. Malik felt his heartbeat climb his throat. Pastor Emmanuel closed his eyes for a second, as if listening for a voice beneath the noise of the day. In the doorway, bright morning spilled across the floor in a rectangle. The city noise faded for a breath. The room held its air and did not let go. Renee turned to Amara fully, the tiny cloth between them like a bridge. What was your mother's name? She asked, voice almost not there. Amara lifted her chin, brave and small. Nia, she said. Nia Johnson. Renee's fingers tightened on the cloth. That is the girl I prayed with, she said, and the room shifted as if a door the size of the sky had just swung open. For a long moment no one spoke. Even the hum of the small fridge seemed to hush, as if the entire room was listening to something unseen. Renee's fingers trembled around the piece of cloth. Nia Johnson, she repeated, her voice catching. That's the name of the young woman I prayed with 8 years ago. She was so frightened that night. She kept saying she didn't want her baby to grow up alone in a world that wouldn't love her. Amara looked up at Renee, her big brown eyes filling with 1,000 silent questions. You knew my mama? Renee nodded slowly, her heart racing. Yes, sweetheart. I think I did. Malik's gaze darted between them, his own breath uneven. Wait, Renee, are you saying? I'm saying, Renee whispered, that the little girl that young woman left in the hospital ward, she paused, looking directly at Amara, might be standing right in front of me. Beezy's eyes widened, her mouth falling open. What are you talking about? This child is my sister's daughter. My late sister Nia's daughter. She died when Amara was barely 1 month old. Renee turned to her gently. Yes, but the cloth, the same one I gave her. I remember Nia's words so clearly. She said if anything ever happened to her, she hoped God would send someone kind enough to raise her baby with love. And she pressed this piece of fabric into my hand before leaving. The silence that followed was not ordinary. It was the kind that bends time, the kind that separates what was from what will never be again. Amara blinked fast, trying to understand. So, my mama met you before she died? Renee nodded. Yes, my darling. And she prayed for you that night. Tears filled Amara's eyes. She told me once that someone kind prayed for me when I was small. I didn't know it was you. She took a tiny step forward. Does that mean God brought me to you? Renee's lips parted, but no sound came out. Her heart thudded loud in her ears. 15 years of waiting, of tears, of prayers, and this? She reached out a trembling hand and brushed the edge of Amara's ribboned hair. Maybe Amara. Maybe he did. Teo looked between them, uneasy, guilt sliding over his face. So, what are you saying? The girl belongs to you now? Just like that? No, Malik said, steady but firm. We're not saying that. But what happened here isn't by accident. Pastor Emmanuel folded his hands, his calm voice settling the air again. This is what we call divine intersection. The threads of pain, prayer, and promise, woven together by the same God who heard 2 cries in one morning. The cry of a child wanting love, and the cry of a couple wanting a child. No one breathed for a second. Then Beezy's voice cut through softly. Pastor, I didn't know my sister met anyone from the church. She told me the hospital helped her, but she never said who. Her tone softened further, shame creeping into the edges. I've tried, but I'm tired. This child reminds me too much of everything I've lost. Amara's little face fell. Renee knelt beside her, her eyes kind and full of light. Sweetheart, do you understand what we're saying? Amara nodded hesitantly. You mean, maybe God heard my letter today, because he already started answering it a long time ago? Renee smiled through her tears. Yes, baby. That's exactly what I mean. The room was still, until Pastor Emmanuel stepped closer, placing a hand gently on Teo's shoulder. Brother Teo, I believe this is a sacred moment. But we must handle it wisely. This child's care must be discussed properly with love and patience, not fear or pride. God is moving, but we must move rightly. Teo rubbed his forehead, his voice unsteady. I don't even know what to think anymore. Maybe I've been too harsh. I just didn't want her to grow up without family. Family isn't always blood, Pastor said softly. Sometimes it's chosen by grace. Renee took Amara's hands into hers. We're not here to take you away, Amara. We're just here to make sure you're safe, and to remind you that your prayers are not forgotten. Amara smiled faintly. Mama Joy said God doesn't read letters with his eyes. He reads them with his heart. Renee let out a soft laugh through her tears. She's right. Then Malik, who had been silent, stepped forward and spoke with quiet resolve. Pastor, can we help her? I mean in a real way, school fees, food, medical care, whatever's needed. Pastor Emmanuel nodded. You can. But more than that, maybe this is the beginning of something greater. Renee turned to him, confusion flickering in her eyes. What do you mean, Pastor? He smiled, the corners of his lips lifting just slightly. Renee, you've spent 15 years praying for a child. And this little one, he said, nodding toward Amara, has spent 8 years praying for parents. If this is not divine symmetry, then what is it? Renee gasped, her heart thudding. Malik blinked hard, struggling to find words. Teo sat back slowly, rubbing his face. Are you saying God is trying to, join them? I'm saying God is answering 2 prayers with 1 miracle, Pastor Emmanuel replied. The air grew heavy again, filled with wonder and trembling disbelief. Malik turned to Renee, their eyes locking in a way that said what words couldn't. They had come to church that morning to beg for a child, never knowing the answer was already sitting inside, barefoot, clutching a letter written in faith. Amara looked from one face to another. So, maybe God brought us all together? Renee nodded, her voice breaking. Yes, baby. Maybe he did. Later that morning, as they walked out of Beezy's small house, Amara's small hand was tucked firmly inside Renee's. Pastor Emmanuel promised to arrange a family meeting with social services and the church board to discuss how best to support Amara and her guardians. Malik couldn't stop looking back at the little girl every few seconds, as though afraid she might vanish if he blinked too long. The sun was bright now, scattering gold across the roofs of Lagos. Life carried on, buses honking, traders calling, but for Malik and Renee the world had shifted forever. As they reached the corner, Amara tugged gently at Renee's hand. Auntie? Yes, my dear? Can we come to church tomorrow again? I want to thank God properly. Renee smiled and squeezed her hand. We'll be there. I promise. Behind them, Pastor Emmanuel watched, his lips curved in a knowing smile. Sometimes, he murmured to himself, he answers faster than we imagine. That evening Malik and Renee sat in their quiet home. The same home that had echoed with emptiness for years now felt different, like laughter could suddenly fit inside. On the dining table lay Amara's letter, flattened and clean, the words standing strong in her small handwriting. Dear God, please give me a mommy and a daddy who will love me and never leave. Renee traced the words with her finger. She wrote it like she knew he would listen. Malik nodded, his voice soft. Maybe she reminded him of our own letter. Renee smiled sadly. Our letter was full of tears. Hers was full of hope. He looked up at her. Maybe that's why hers reached him faster. They laughed gently, holding hands in the soft light of evening. But under the laughter there was something more, a pull. A promise. A question they both knew they'd have to answer soon. Would they be willing to open their hearts fully, to become the parents Amara had prayed for? Neither spoke it aloud, but both knew the answer. And outside, beyond the window, the wind rustled softly through the trees, like the whisper of a prayer finding its way home. Tell us what you think in the comments. And if this story is touching your heart so far, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share this video with someone who still believes in miracles. The next morning dawned with soft gray clouds stretching lazily across the Lagos sky. A light drizzle tapped against the windows of Malik and Renee's modest home, a melody of new beginnings. Renee woke early, unable to sleep. The events of the previous day replayed in her mind. The letter, the little girl's trembling voice, the tiny piece of cloth with her initials. It all felt like something divine had unfolded before her eyes. She turned and looked at Malik, still half asleep beside her. Malik, she whispered. Are you awake? He grunted softly. Barely, but with that tone. I should be. Renee smiled, though her eyes carried the weight of wonder. I kept thinking about Amara. About how everything lined up. Her name, her prayer, that cloth. Malik sat up, rubbing his eyes. I've been thinking about her too. It doesn't feel like coincidence. It feels orchestrated. Exactly, Renee said, her hands trembling slightly. And Pastor's words. 2 prayers, 1 miracle. She shook her head, eyes glistening. Malik, what if that little girl really is meant to be ours? He reached out, took her hand gently and squeezed. Renee, maybe she is. But we have to be careful. We can't just take her home. We need to go through the right process. I know, Renee said quickly. But still. I can't stop thinking. When I held her hand, it felt like holding something I'd lost a long time ago. Malik smiled faintly. Maybe God finally decided we've waited long enough. By mid-morning the drizzle had cleared. The church courtyard smelled of wet earth and rain-washed flowers. Pastor Emmanuel was already there, sitting in his usual chair beneath the mango tree, Bible open on his lap. When he saw Malik and Renee walk in, he smiled knowingly. I was expecting you too, he said, closing his Bible. I see you didn't sleep much. Renee laughed softly. Not at all. We couldn't stop thinking about her. Neither could I, Pastor said, his voice warm. I prayed about it through the night. And do you know what God told me? Renee leaned forward eagerly. What? He smiled. He said, I do not write stories halfway. Malik let out a quiet breath. So what do we do, Pastor? First, Pastor said, you meet with the Child Welfare Board. I've already called Sister Dorcas. She'll guide you through the process. You can help support Amara's schooling and welfare while her guardianship case is reviewed. Renee nodded eagerly. We'll do whatever it takes. She will need stability, Pastor continued. And love, more love than she's known. If this is God's plan, the door will open naturally. Don't push, don't force. Just walk with Him. Just then, the sound of small footsteps echoed at the church entrance. Amara appeared, wearing a clean blue gown that looked one size too big but had clearly been ironed with care. In her hand was a small umbrella, probably borrowed from Mama Joy's corner shop. Her bright eyes lit up when she saw them. Auntie Renee. Uncle Malik, she said joyfully, running up and hugging Renee's waist tightly. You came back. Renee knelt and hugged her close. Of course, my darling. We said we would. Malik smiled and brushed her braids lightly. How are you today, little one? I'm happy, she said, flashing a toothy grin. Auntie didn't shout at me this morning. And I told her you said God heard my letter. She didn't believe me, so I told her she can come and ask you herself. Pastor Emmanuel chuckled. You're a bold little one, aren't you? Amara nodded proudly. Mama Joy says faith needs boldness. The pastor laughed heartily. She's not wrong. Renee couldn't help watching the little girl, her small hands, her sparkling eyes, the way she seemed to carry sunshine with her despite her scars. Everything about her felt like a missing piece that had suddenly been found. Pastor stood. Let's go inside, shall we? I think we have more prayers to finish. They entered the church, which was still quiet except for the faint creak of wooden pews. The early light slanted through the stained glass windows again, painting the floor in gold and blue. Amara ran straight to the front pew, knelt, and clasped her hands together. Thank you, God, she whispered aloud, for hearing me so fast. I didn't even finish my letter before you sent them. Renee and Malik exchanged a look that melted them both. Pastor Emmanuel placed a hand on her small head. And what do we say to God when He answers? Thank you, she said instantly. And I'll be a good girl always. That's my girl, the pastor said warmly. Now, Amara, there's something we want to talk about. She looked up curiously. What is it? Renee knelt beside her. Sweetheart, would you like to spend more time with us? Maybe visit sometimes, help me bake, go to school, and come for Sunday service with us. Amara's eyes widened in delight. Really? You mean, like family? Yes, Renee said softly, voice trembling. Like family. Amara threw her arms around Renee's neck, her little voice muffled against her shoulder. I told God you'd say yes. Malik's heart clenched as he watched them. He looked up at the altar, and for the first time in 15 years, his lips formed a prayer that wasn't filled with pain. Thank you, Lord, he whispered. But just as peace settled over the moment, the heavy church doors burst open again, this time with a different sound. Everyone turned sharply. Standing in the doorway was a woman in her late 20s, her face pale, her clothes dusty from travel. Her eyes darted around the church until they landed on Amara. Amara, she cried out, her voice trembling. Amara froze, blinking rapidly. Auntie, she whispered. But the woman shook her head, tears spilling down her cheeks. No, not Auntie. It's me, Grace. Your mother's friend from Joss. Renee slowly rose to her feet, confusion furrowing her brow. Grace. The woman's chest heaved as she stepped forward, clutching a worn handbag close to her chest. I've been looking for her for years, for Nia's daughter. I finally found you. Pastor Emmanuel frowned slightly. Grace, what are you talking about? Grace looked around, her eyes wide with desperation. There's something you all need to know, something about Nia's death, and this child's real father. The church went completely silent. Amara's small hand slipped into Renee's trembling fingers. Malik took a step closer, eyes narrowing in disbelief. Grace looked at them all, her lips quivering. She was never abandoned, Grace said quietly. She was hidden. Because the man who fathered her is still alive. The words echoed through the empty church like thunder rolling across the sky. Renee gasped, gripping the pew for balance. Malik turned to Pastor Emmanuel, who looked as stunned as everyone else. Amara's eyes darted from one adult face to another, her little heart pounding. My father? She whispered. He's alive. Grace nodded, her tears falling freely now. Yes, child. And he's been searching for you too. He just never knew where to look. The silence that followed felt heavy enough to make the walls tremble. Renee's heart broke and swelled at once. Love and fear tangled together. If Amara's father was alive, then everything was about to change. The silence after Grace's words was so thick it seemed to swallow every sound in the church. Even the birds that usually perched on the tall windowsills were quiet, as though heaven itself was holding its breath. Pastor Emmanuel finally spoke, his calm voice cutting through the tension. "Grace," he said gently, "you must explain yourself. Who are you and how do you know this child?" Grace took a trembling step forward. Her face was drawn, the years clearly written in the lines around her tired eyes. "My name is Grace Ocone," she said. "I was Nia's closest friend. We met in Jos when she was working as a nurse assistant. I stood by her through her pregnancy, and I was there the night she disappeared from the hospital." Renee's hands clenched against the pew. "Disappeared?" Grace nodded. "Yes." She was terrified. The man responsible for her pregnancy was powerful, married, and dangerous. He told her to get rid of the baby or face the consequences. When she refused, he threatened her life. Amara gasped softly. Renee instinctively pulled her closer, wrapping an arm protectively around her small shoulders. Grace went on, voice shaking with emotion. "Nia was brave, but she was also desperate. The night before she gave birth, she whispered to me that she wanted to leave something behind. Something that could help whoever found her child know that she was born from love, not shame. That's why she kept that little cloth with the stitched initials. She said it came from a kind woman who had prayed with her." Renee pressed a hand to her chest, tears streaming down her face. "That was me. I remember that night vividly. I remember how afraid she was." Grace nodded slowly. "After she gave birth, she stayed at the church clinic for a few days. Then she told me she was leaving Lagos for a while to hide. She said she'd send for me once she was safe. But she never did. Months later, I heard she'd been found dead near the highway outside Ibadan." Amara's little voice trembled. "Mama, was she killed?" Grace's lips quivered. "The police said it was an accident. But Nia told me that man, the one who wanted her to get rid of the pregnancy, had threatened her the last time they spoke. I never believed it was an accident." Pastor Emmanuel's brows furrowed. "And this man, her lover, do you know who he was?" Grace hesitated, glancing around the church as if afraid the walls themselves might hear. "Yes," she whispered. "His name was Dr. Charles Adetola. He was a wealthy physician, the owner of Mercy Spring Hospital in Lekki. He was respected, feared even. Married to a politician's daughter. Nia was one of his nurses." Malik exchanged a startled look with Renee. "Wait," he said slowly, "Mercy Spring? That's the same hospital where we went for our last fertility tests." Grace's eyes widened. "Then you've met him." Renee covered her mouth, remembering the tall, polished man in the white coat with the calm, commanding voice. "Dr. Adetola. He was the one who told us that our chances of having a child naturally were almost zero." Pastor Emmanuel's face darkened. "I know that name too. He donates to churches and orphanages, trying to wash something only repentance can cleanse." Amara's eyes darted between the adults. "So, he's my daddy?" she asked quietly, her small voice trembling with confusion. Grace knelt in front of her. "Yes, Amara. He's your father. But he doesn't know where you are. After your mother died, I searched for you. But you had already been taken in by her sister. I tried to reach them, but by then they had moved to Lagos mainland. I didn't find you until last week, when I visited Mama Joy's shop and saw you writing that letter." Renee's eyes widened. "You saw her?" Grace nodded. "Yes. I didn't want to frighten her, so I watched from a distance. I saw her kneel at the altar, praying for parents. It broke my heart. Then I saw you and your husband enter the church and I realized, maybe this is how God is writing the rest of the story." Malik leaned against the pew trying to process everything. "So her father is alive, wealthy, and living right here in Lagos. And he doesn't know his daughter survived." Grace looked up at him, her face full of weariness. "He doesn't. I confronted him once years ago. I told him Nia had died but that her baby was alive. He denied everything, said he never knew any Nia Johnson. But I saw the fear in his eyes." Pastor Emmanuel's voice hardened slightly. "A man may deny his sin before the world but not before God. Sooner or later, truth finds its way to the door." Amara tugged on Renee's hand, her voice soft. "Will he want me?" The question hit Renee like a knife. She bent down, cupping the child's face in her palms. "Oh, sweetheart," she whispered, "you are wanted already. You're loved. Whether that man accepts you or not, you are not alone." Pastor Emmanuel nodded approvingly. "Well said. But this truth cannot stay buried. If her father is alive and this story is true, he must know. For the child's sake, and her mother's memory. Grace hesitated. I agree. But you must be careful. Dr. Adetola has money, influence, and pride. He will not welcome this truth easily. Malik's jaw tightened. We're not afraid of pride, ma'am. Not when a child's destiny is at stake. Renee looked down at Amara, who now clung tightly to her dress. If he truly has a heart, she said softly, maybe seeing her will remind him of the woman he wronged. Grace nodded. Then I'll take you to him. Tomorrow morning. His hospital. But we must go quietly. If his wife finds out before he does, things could become messy. Pastor Emmanuel clasped his hands together. Then tonight we pray. Because if this is truly God's design, no man can stand against it. He looked at Malik and Renee. Are you ready to face the truth? Malik looked at Renee. We've waited 15 years for an answer. I think we're ready for whatever comes. Renee nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. We just didn't expect the answer to come with this much storm. Pastor Emmanuel smiled faintly. Every miracle comes wrapped in mystery. But remember, the same God who wrote this story knows how it ends. As the day drew to a close, Renee and Malik walked home with Amara between them. The little girl's small hands held tightly onto theirs, her face lifted toward the soft orange sky. Will my daddy be kind? She asked quietly. Malik squeezed her hand gently. We don't know yet, baby. But we do know this, you're surrounded by people who love you already. She smiled a little. Then I'm not scared. Renee felt her throat tighten. That's right, my love. You're not alone anymore. But deep inside, as the evening breeze brushed her face, Renee's heart whispered a silent prayer. God, if this is your plan, let the truth bring healing, not heartbreak. She looked down at the small hand in hers, the same small hand that had written a letter powerful enough to shake heaven, and silently vowed that no matter what happened next, she would fight for this child with everything she had. The next morning arrived heavy with humidity and tension. The early Lagos sun was rising through a haze of mist, painting the sky gold and gray. Renee woke before dawn, her hands trembling slightly as she buttoned her blouse. Malik sat quietly at the dining table, staring into a cup of untouched tea. Neither of them had slept much. The thought of taking Amara to meet the man who had denied her mother's existence haunted their minds all night. Amara, bright-eyed and innocent, came out of the guest room wearing a simple pink dress that Renee had washed and ironed for her. The dress hung loosely on her small frame, but it made her look radiant. Renee knelt and fixed the ribbon in her hair. You look beautiful, my darling, she said softly. Amara smiled shyly. Thank you, Auntie Renee. Then she added, almost whispering, will my daddy know me when he sees me? Renee's heart squeezed. I think he will feel something in his heart, she said gently. Just like we did. Malik forced a smile and stood. Ready? Amara nodded eagerly. Yes. They stepped outside, meeting Grace by the gate. She looked tired but determined. She was dressed in a neat Ankara wrapper and carried a brown envelope clutched to her chest. Inside were old photos, Nia's hospital file, and a copy of Amara's birth certificate. The pieces of truth they hoped would break through Dr. Adetola's wall of denial. By 10 a.m., they stood outside Mercy Spring Hospital, the very same building where Malik and Renee had once come for fertility consultations. It was large, glass-fronted, and spotless, with uniformed guards standing at the entrance. The white walls gleamed under the morning sun, as if the place itself was trying too hard to look perfect. Amara clung tightly to Renee's hand as they walked inside. Nurses bustled through the hallway, their shoes clicking on the tiles. Malik noticed how the staff greeted Grace, some with respect, others with curiosity, as if they sensed that something unusual was about to happen. Grace walked to the front desk. Please, she said to the receptionist, we need to see Dr. Charles Adetola. It's urgent. The young woman behind the counter glanced up, polite but firm. Do you have an appointment, ma'am? No, Grace said, straightening. But tell him Grace Ocone is here, with news about Nia Johnson. The receptionist frowned. Nia Johnson? Yes, Grace said sharply. Tell him it concerns a personal matter. The receptionist hesitated, picked up the phone and made a quick call. A few moments later she looked back up, surprised. He said to send you in. Grace exhaled shakily. Let's go. They followed her through a long corridor until they reached a polished wooden door with a silver nameplate. Dr. Charles Adetola, Chief Medical Director. Grace knocked once. Come in, a deep, controlled voice called from inside. They stepped in. Dr. Adetola sat behind a large mahogany desk, dressed immaculately in a tailored navy suit. He was in his mid-50s, tall and dignified, with the calm confidence of a man used to being obeyed. His dark skin gleamed against his crisp white shirt. But when his eyes lifted and landed on Grace, a flicker of discomfort crossed his face. "Grace Ocone," he said slowly. "I didn't expect to see you again." Grace's chin lifted. "And yet here I am. I told you we would meet again someday. Only this time I didn't come alone." Dr. Adetola's eyes moved past her, first to Malik, then to Renee, and finally to the small girl standing beside them. For a brief moment he froze. His breath hitched just slightly. Amara looked at him, her large brown eyes full of curiosity. "Good morning, sir," she said softly. The sound of her voice cracked something in the air. Dr. Adetola blinked rapidly, his composure slipping for a heartbeat. "Who is this?" Grace opened her brown envelope and carefully spread the documents on his desk. "Her name is Amara Johnson. Nia's daughter. Your daughter." The words seemed to hang in the room like thunder waiting to fall. Dr. Adetola pushed back slightly in his chair. "That's impossible," he said coldly. "Nia Johnson is dead." Grace's eyes hardened. "Yes. And she died because you abandoned her when she needed you most. But her child didn't die. This," she pointed to Amara, "is the proof." He glanced down at the papers. The birth certificate, the photograph of Nia holding a newborn, the hospital file signed by him years ago. His jaw tightened. "I don't know what game you're playing," he said sharply, his tone rising. "Anyone could forge documents. I'm a married man. I have a family. Don't come here dragging up lies." Renee stepped forward, her voice calm but firm. "Dr. Adetola, this isn't a game. Look at her. Look at her face. She has your eyes." He turned sharply toward her, about to retort, but then he stopped. For the first time he really looked at Amara. The tilt of her chin. The faint dimple in her left cheek. The small mole near her eyebrow, one he shared. His face paled. Amara looked up at him timidly. "Sir, are you my daddy?" The room went completely still. Dr. Adetola swallowed hard, his eyes glistening. His voice broke. "I don't know." Grace's voice softened, though her anger still burned beneath it. "You do know. You've always known. You just chose pride over truth." He gripped the edge of his desk, staring down at the papers as though they might burst into flames. "Do you know what you're asking? My wife, my reputation, my career." Pastor Emmanuel, who had quietly entered moments earlier, finally spoke from the doorway. "And what about your soul, doctor?" Dr. Adetola turned sharply. "Pastor?" "Yes," Pastor Emmanuel said, stepping forward. "You've built hospitals for the body but neglected the healing of your heart. This child carries your blood. Are you going to deny her too?" Dr. Adetola's hands trembled. He sank slowly back into his chair, the fight leaving his body. He covered his face with both hands. "I was a fool," he murmured. "I was scared. My wife's father threatened to ruin me if I ever shamed their family. I thought Nia had handled it. When I heard she was dead, I buried it all. I told myself it was over." Renee's voice was soft but steady. "But it wasn't over, doctor. Because God doesn't let us bury what's meant to live." He looked up, eyes red. "What do you want from me?" Grace pointed to Amara. "Not us, her. She wants the truth." Amara stepped forward slowly. Her small hands trembled, but her voice was clear. "I only wanted a daddy who would love me." Tears welled in Dr. Adetola's eyes. He rose from behind his desk and knelt down so he was at her level. "Amara," he whispered, his voice cracking, "I am so sorry. I failed your mother. I failed you." Amara blinked at him. "So, you are my daddy?" He nodded, unable to speak. She took a step closer and gently touched his face with her tiny hand. "Then I forgive you." That single sentence shattered the last wall around his heart. He broke down completely, pulling her into his arms and sobbing into her small shoulder. Renee covered her mouth as tears streamed down her face. Malik placed a hand on her back, his own eyes glistening. Even Pastor Emmanuel's voice trembled as he said quietly, "This is what grace looks like." For a long while no one moved. The cold doctor who had spent years hiding behind status and wealth now wept openly in front of the child he had once rejected. Finally he stood, wiping his eyes. "I want to make it right," he said hoarsely. "Whatever it takes. I'll do the DNA test, I'll handle the paperwork. I'll take care of her." Grace's eyes softened. "Then maybe Nia can finally rest." Renee smiled faintly. "And maybe Amara's letter has found its full answer." Amara looked up at Renee and Malik. Does that mean I can still see you too? Renee knelt and hugged her tightly. Always, my love. No matter where life takes you. Malik nodded, his voice gentle. Family isn't about who gave you life. It's about who stands beside you in it. And we're not going anywhere. Pastor Emmanuel clasped his hands together, closing his eyes briefly. 2 prayers, he murmured, one answered in ways no one expected. Everyone stood in a circle of quiet awe as sunlight poured through the window, lighting up the room. But deep inside, Renee couldn't shake one thought, the way Dr. Adetila's expression had changed when he saw Grace's envelope. There was something he was still hiding. Something left unsaid. And she was right. Because as they turned to leave, Dr. Adetila picked up one paper from his desk, an old letter sealed in brown ink, and stared at it with haunted eyes. A letter written by Nia Johnson before she died. And inside it, there was a secret he had never dared to reveal. The drive home from Mercy Spring Hospital was quiet. Even the sound of Lagos traffic, normally chaotic and loud, seemed far away, softened by the heavy silence inside the car. Amara sat in the back seat between Renee and Grace, her small fingers gripping Renee's hand. Malik drove, his eyes flicking to the rearview mirror every few seconds, as though checking that the miracle they had just witnessed was still real. Renee stared out the window, the morning sunlight glinting off her tears. Malik, she whispered, I don't even know how to describe what happened back there. He exhaled deeply. Neither do I. But you saw it? When Amara forgave him, something broke inside that man. Maybe that's what real grace looks like. Grace nodded quietly. Nia always said her daughter would be her redemption. I think she was right. But even as they spoke, Renee's mind replayed that final moment, the strange look on Dr. Adetila's face as he held that old letter in his trembling hands. There was something behind his eyes. Guilt or fear. Something unresolved. Grace, Renee said softly, when Nia left Joss, did she ever mention writing anything before she died? A message? A will? Grace frowned, thinking. She told me she wrote a letter for her daughter, but she never gave it to me. She said she would keep it somewhere safe until the right time. Renee exchanged a glance with Malik. He has it, she said. That man has her final letter. Malik nodded grimly. Then whatever's in that letter, it's something he never wanted anyone else to see. Later that evening, a knock sounded at the door of Malik and Renee's home. Renee opened it, and froze. Dr. Charles Adetila stood there, holding a small brown envelope in his hands. His suit was gone. He wore a plain shirt, the first button undone, his face tired and humbled. May I come in? He asked quietly. Renee stepped aside. Of course. He entered slowly, looking around the modest living room. The family photos, the Bible on the table, the smell of home-cooked stew in the air. Malik stood from the couch, offering a polite nod. I came to thank you, Dr. Adetila began, his voice subdued, for not judging me when you had every reason to, and to return something that belongs to Amara. He held out the envelope. It was old, its edges yellowed, the handwriting delicate but firm. To my daughter, Amara, when the world is ready. Renee took it gently, her fingers trembling. You've had this all along? He nodded slowly. Nia gave it to a nurse the night she left the hospital, asking that it be sent to me if anything happened. When she died, it was delivered anonymously. I opened it once, and couldn't bear what I read. I locked it away, hoping time would erase it. Malik frowned. Why bring it now? Dr. Adetila's voice cracked. Because she deserves the truth. All of it. Renee looked at Malik, who gave a slight nod. Then she carefully broke the old seal and unfolded the letter. The scent of old paper filled the room as she began to read aloud. My dearest Amara, if you are reading this, it means I could not stay long enough to watch you grow. But know this, my little sunshine, you were never a mistake. You were the answer to a prayer whispered in fear and faith at the same time. Your father and I loved each other once, but fear is a thief. It stole his courage and nearly stole your future. Still, I believe one day God will lead you to those who will love you without fear. If you ever meet your father, tell him I forgave him before I took my last breath. I prayed that God would break his pride and give him a second chance through you. But if he cannot accept you, then find the ones who can. You will know them by the peace you feel when you look into their eyes. That peace will tell you, home is here. And one more thing, your mother never wanted you to live in anger. So love my daughter. Love freely, love deeply. Because love is stronger than shame, stronger than fear, and stronger than death. With all my heart. Mama Nia. When Renee finished reading, the room was completely silent. Tears rolled freely down everyone's faces, Malik's, Renee's, even Dr. Adetila's. Amara, sitting on the floor, looked up at them, her eyes wide. "Mama wrote that for me?" Renee nodded through tears. "Yes, sweetheart. She did. She wanted you to know how deeply she loved you." Amara reached out and touched the letter reverently, tracing her mother's name with one tiny finger. "She said I would know home when I see peace," she said softly. Then she looked up at Renee and Malik. "I feel peace when I'm with you." Renee's heart shattered and healed all at once. She knelt and pulled the little girl into her arms, hugging her tightly. "And we feel it when we're with you too." Dr. Adetila's voice came softly from behind them. "She's right. That's what Nia wanted. You too were part of God's plan for her all along." He swallowed hard, emotion thick in his voice. "I can provide for her materially, but I know where her spirit belongs." Renee looked up startled. "Doctor?" He nodded, his eyes glistening. "You and Malik should raise her. If the courts approve, I'll make the arrangements official. She needs love more than luxury." Malik stepped forward, shaking the man's hand firmly. "That's the first selfless thing you've done, doctor. And it's the right thing." Dr. Adetila nodded slowly, then turned to Amara. "I can't undo the past, but I'll always be near if you ever want to know me." Amara smiled softly. "Okay, Daddy." He smiled faintly, his voice trembling. "You sound just like her when you say that." Then, without another word, he turned and walked out into the night, leaving behind the letter that would change all their lives forever. Renee held Amara close as Malik wrapped his arms around them both. "You see, my darling?" Renee whispered. "Your letter reached heaven, and heaven answered in a way none of us expected." Amara nodded sleepily against her shoulder. "God really reads letters with his heart." Renee kissed her forehead. "Yes, baby. He truly does." They sat together in silence, the three of them bathed in the soft golden glow of the lamp. Outside, the crickets sang and the night air felt lighter, as if the world had just exhaled. But even in that peace, Renee's heart stirred. Something about the letter's final line kept echoing in her head. "You will know them by the peace you feel when you look into their eyes." She had no doubt anymore. This little girl was their miracle. The following week dawned with a promise of peace. The sun rose early, bright and golden, glinting off the rooftops of Lagos, and the birds sang as though the city itself was celebrating. Inside New Dawn Chapel, the air buzzed with quiet anticipation. Wooden benches gleamed from fresh polish, and rays of sunlight filtered through stained glass windows, painting the altar in soft blue and gold. It was the perfect day for something new, for something sacred. Renee smoothed Amara's hair one last time before the hearing. The little girl was dressed in a white lace gown with pink ribbons around her waist. Her skin glowed, her smile gentle but nervous. "Are you ready, sweetheart?" Renee asked softly. Amara nodded. "Yes, Auntie." "But will I really be your daughter forever?" Renee's heart swelled. "Forever and ever, my love. No one can change that now." Malik came over, adjusting his tie nervously. "You two look like angels," he said with a small smile. Pastor Emmanuel, who stood nearby, chuckled. "You mean like three angels, Brother Malik?" Grace laughed from the pew behind them. "Don't worry, Pastor. Heaven already knows this family is official. It's just earth catching up." The courtroom session had been scheduled to take place in the church hall itself, by special approval from the court, since it had begun as a church welfare case. The judge, a warm middle-aged woman with kind eyes, was on her way. Everything felt right. But then, just as the church bell rang 10 o'clock, the sound of hurried footsteps echoed in the hallway. Everyone turned toward the entrance. Dr. Charles Adetila stepped inside. He was dressed simply, no suit, no air of authority, just a man weighed down by something deeper than pride. His face was pale, and his right hand gripped a folded envelope. Renee's heart skipped. "Doctor? Is something wrong?" He shook his head slowly. "No, Mrs. Carter. Everything's finally right. But before this hearing begins, there's something I must say. Something I've carried for too long." The room quieted. Even the whispering congregation fell still. He stepped forward, eyes fixed on Pastor Emmanuel. "Pastor, before God and these witnesses, I want to confess the last piece of truth about Nia's death." Grace's eyes widened. "You mean there's more?" Dr. Adetila nodded, his face ashen. "Yes. I've carried guilt that wasn't just for abandoning her, it was for something worse. The night she died, she called me. She said she was coming to Lagos to tell my wife everything. I panicked. I drove out to meet her, to stop her. We argued by the roadside. It was raining." He swallowed hard, his voice trembling. She ran across the road, shouting that she'd rather die than live as my secret. A car came out of nowhere. It hit her before I could reach her. Renee gasped. Malik's jaw tightened. Dr. Adetila's hands shook as tears filled his eyes. I didn't push her. But I didn't help her either. I stood there, frozen, as the rain fell on her body. I called no ambulance, no police. I was a coward. He turned toward Amara, his voice cracking. Your mother didn't die because God wanted her early. She died because fear ruled my heart. I will carry that shame forever. The silence that followed was suffocating. Even the air seemed to hold its breath. Then, to everyone's shock, Amara walked up to him. She was trembling, but her eyes, those same eyes that mirrored his, were filled with something stronger than anger. Compassion. She reached out and touched his shaking hand. Daddy, she said softly, Mama already forgave you. Her letter said so. Tears streamed down his face. You don't understand, my child. I don't deserve it. Amara shook her head gently. Mama said love is stronger than shame. The man broke completely. He sank to his knees before the little girl, sobbing openly. Pastor Emmanuel closed his eyes and whispered a prayer of mercy under his breath. When Dr. Adetila finally stood, he handed the folded envelope to the judge who had just entered quietly at the back of the hall. Your Honor, he said with trembling resolve, this contains my written confession. I'll surrender my medical license and accept whatever punishment the law decides. But I beg that this hearing continues, for Amara's sake. The judge nodded solemnly, accepting the envelope. It takes courage to face truth, Doctor. The law will judge your actions, but I believe God is already at work on your heart. She turned to the crowd, her voice steady but tender. Now, let us proceed with the case concerning the custody of Amara Johnson. The room brightened again as Malik and Renee stepped forward, holding Amara between them. The judge smiled down at the little girl. Amara, my dear, do you wish to live with Mr. and Mrs. Carter as your parents? Amara looked up at Renee, then at Malik, then back at the judge. Yes, ma'am, she said with a grin. They make me feel safe, and they pray with me before I sleep. The judge smiled warmly. And to you, Mr. and Mrs. Carter, do you promise to love, protect, and raise her as your own child? Renee's eyes glistened. With everything we are. Malik nodded, his voice firm. Forever. Then, the judge said, her tone breaking into a smile, by the authority vested in me, I declare Amara officially and legally the daughter of Malik and Renee Carter. A cheer erupted from the entire hall, Grace clapping through her tears, Pastor Emmanuel shouting, Hallelujah, and even Dr. Adetila bowing his head in gratitude. Amara turned to Renee and Malik, her eyes shining brighter than the sunbeams pouring through the windows. So now, I'm really your daughter? Renee knelt and pulled her close. Not just our daughter. You're our miracle. Malik placed his hand gently on Amara's shoulder. And your mother is smiling from heaven right now. Pastor Emmanuel raised his hands high. Let us give thanks. For what God joins together, no man, no circumstance, no past mistake can separate. The entire church joined in song, voices rising like one great wave of joy. As they sang, Renee looked up at the stained glass, where the light formed a golden heart across the altar. She remembered the day they first found Amara's letter on the floor, the trembling words of an 8-year-old girl written with pure faith. Dear God, please give me a mommy and a daddy who will love me and never leave. And now, standing in that same church, those words had become flesh and reality. Renee smiled, tears glistening down her cheeks. You did it, Lord, she whispered. You really read letters with your heart. Amara looked up and saw her smiling. What are you thinking, Mommy? Renee laughed softly through her tears. I was just thanking God for keeping his promise. Amara smiled, slipping her tiny hand into Renee's. Then I'll write him another letter tonight. Renee bent down, curious. What will you write this time? Amara's face lit up with a shy grin. I'll say, Dear God, thank you for giving me 2 daddies, one on earth and one in heaven who never gives up. Renee couldn't hold back the tears anymore. She hugged her daughter tightly as Malik wrapped his arms around them both. Grace stood at the back, smiling, and whispered to Pastor Emmanuel, Do you see what faith can do? He nodded slowly. Yes, Sister Grace. When faith writes a letter, heaven always replies. Outside, as they stepped into the sunlight, a gentle breeze brushed past them, carrying the faint scent of rain and mango blossoms. It was as though the wind itself was whispering amen.